What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. Not joined today by Connor Rodgers, but joined by a great friend of the pod, back for, I believe, the third or fourth time now, and always bringing copious amounts of optimism, which we love here. Dan Hanzus, around the NFL. We're excited, and I wanted to talk to Dan and get everyone else excited about how excited we are. How you doing? Thanks for joining.
I'm doing great. I don't necessarily, Joe, feel like I want to be the stock optimism guy, but I guess it's just in my DNA as a Jets fan. As you know, there's no reason for that to be the case, but I was thinking about it before we're coming on. We're up to 4 years, and I've been kind of a diehard fan now for 30 years, and 4 years where it felt like the optimism was sky high to the point where the outside of our Jets fandom people agreed. 99, yep. 2010, 2011, and now 23. And, there's a lot that has to go right, obviously, still, including the quarterback that we acquired being the quarterback that we want him to be. But, man, it feels good for it to be one of those years for the Jets.
It's such a rarity where they're expected to be good, and then they're actually good. I think the only year that's really clicked has been 2010. Like, everyone thought they would be good that year. They actually followed through. They were good all year. They got to the AFC Championship game. Probably should have got to the Super Bowl. That's something to complain about for a different day. But 99 was, of course, a disaster from week one. 2011, never going to be remembered fondly with how the season ended and really propelling the Giants to the Super Bowl. And now you have this year where I have to rub my eyes as I keep seeing these graphics where the Jets are like third in AFC power rankings and top 5 or 6 in Super Bowl odds, and finally have a really friendly schedule. The primetime games and all that stuff's fun. What I care about is 10 home games, if you count the Giants game as a home game. Don't have to fly overseas. No travel the first 8-9 weeks of the season. I saw Warren Sharp basically complaining that the league is favoring the Jets. And I was like, that. Good. You know what? Because their schedule was ridiculous last year and they're due for a year of being favored. Prior to officially getting Rodgers and while they were going to kind of figure out what the plan was, I said this year was playoffs or bust for Douglas and Saleh. They have to figure out quarterback. It's enough already. The rebuild's over. Make the playoffs. Now when you get Rodgers and you see how the rest of the roster is still generally together, I kind of feel like the goal should be to win the AFC East because I don't think Buffalo is quite as good or dominant as everyone is. Is that being too greedy for this coach, this GM, this team, and this roster, where I'm going to feel a little disappointed if they're 9-8 and they're the 7 seed in the AFC? I feel like this should be a team that is hosting a home playoff game because they won the AFC East.
I'm totally with you on that. I feel like if this was a situation where they're fighting and clawing for a wild card spot, I don't think that it would have been a trade that was worth it if that's what your goal was. I think they made the trade thinking they could win the Super Bowl, and I think that's why Jets fans are so excited, because it's all aligned, and it was refreshing for me as a fan, knowing there's been so much dysfunction in the past, to see how the front office and coaching staff was so well aligned in the pursuit and acquisition of Rodgers. And you look at the AFC East, it's tough. Listen, you have the Patriots. Let's start with them. They're the team that's everyone's penciling in for last place in the division right now, for the most part. We still haven't beaten them in 14 years. That is still a mountain the Jets have to climb. The Dolphins, and we talk about it on my podcast around the NFL, the Dolphins have every reason to be as excited as a fan base as the Jets fans do right now, because they have so many pieces. If they could just get help from their quarterback, they could hang with anyone in the AFC. And then there's the Bills, who, I think the interesting thing about Buffalo here is we all know they're going to be a good team again, but has the rest of the division caught up to them a little bit? They showed that throughout last season, and Brian Daboll going out the door, I think, was a bigger deal than people talked about. The offense came down a little bit. They got to the playoffs, and Cincinnati manhandled them in that game, and they're wondering in Orchard Park and in Western New York, is our window already closing? Did we fail in our opportunity to get to the Super Bowl? So I think, Buffalo is the team to beat still until it's proven otherwise. But do I think the Buffalo Bills are set to go 14-3 or whatever? No, I think this could be the way this division is. It could be an 11 wins the division. And hell yeah, the Jets can win 11 games.
I think so. I mean, the schedule, I understand like the first four caught everyone's eyes, but I don't think it's quite that daunting compared to what we've seen in some other years. And good to find out right away, week one, where they stand against Buffalo. And they beat Buffalo last year with Zach Wilson at quarterback. So when you put Rodgers in now Rodgers 2 years ago, 3 years ago, MVP, arguably the best quarterback in the league. Last year had a bad year for him, a year that still would have been one of the 5 best quarterback seasons in Jets franchise history, playing with an injured thumb, playing with a new, younger roster. Now is going to come into Garrett Wilson, a guy he's comfortable with in Lazard. Seems like Corey Davis is going to stay. You got Mecole Hardman for a little speed. Quality enough, top 4, certainly if Wilson takes the leap. Decent group of tight ends. Hopefully Breece Hall back to himself by October. So what version at his age of Rodgers are you expecting? Are we going to get like the revenge, angry, 40 touchdown, oh my God season? Or is it like, he'll be a little better than he was last year? And you know what? That's enough because he has a better roster around him. Like, how good can a guy at his age be? And where does he like rank in the quarter? If you put your Jet bias aside, like where does he rank like in the quarterback hierarchy of the NFL going into this season?
Yeah, factoring in last season and it being a down year and him being banged up, I still think you slot him in the back end of the top 10. And when you think about having full health, having a better roster, having potentially some more motivation on his side to prove some people wrong, I think he absolutely can profile as a top 5 quarterback, which is, again, we were talking a little bit before we jumped on. It's kind of hard to believe that is a situation connected to the New York Jets right now. And I just thought with Rodgers, Joe, the way things set up, once the deal finally went down, and people could say they gave a little bit too much or they blinked, whatever. Like, no one's going to care about that if this team is a powerhouse this upcoming season. It was worth it. But I just like the way what we saw from Rodgers had me feeling even more optimistic. The fact that he took number 8 and kissed the ring and showed a knowledge of Jet history and a reverence for Namath and understanding, which I think a little under the radar, he knew exactly how to play the New York media, this big, bad New York media that everyone thinks could swallow up Rodgers because of all his off the field stuff. He got the haircut, Joe. Yeah. He said the right things. Then he showed up for the voluntary practices
at the Knicks,
courtside at the Knicks, at the Rangers. And all of that tells me, yes, is it all for show? Kind of. But it's also showing this isn't Brett Favre in 2008. And I don't want to like dump on that era because we were just as excited back then when that happened. Do we want to add that season 2 to the group of we can go to the Super Bowl years? I don't know. Yes. Maybe not, but just below it. Maybe it was there. But at the same time, everyone kind of knew the deal with Favre to the point where there was a clause in his contract that he couldn't go to the Vikings. So he was using the Jets as the Jets were using him. Rodgers feels different. It feels like he really does have something he wants to prove, and he is comfortable with being this guy that takes on the load of bringing the Jets out of the wilderness of 53 years. So yeah, I think his motivation to still be great is going to matter. And physically, yeah, he's 39, but he's not 44. I think the way he takes care of himself, I think it is not unreasonable to think that he has another all-pro type season if he could stay healthy.
Yeah, and he also didn't play a lot his first few years, right? So I'm using that to talk myself into that. He's got a little bit of a longer run. I'm expecting 2 years. If they get 3 years, I'd be ecstatic. Sure. If we only get 1 year, I'd be disappointed unless they win a Super Bowl. They can go out on top, do whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
But even if it's PR centric, and I'm sure it is, he's a smart guy. He knows what's being covered. Seeing him at OTAs, he does look like a little like leaner and like kind of like you can tell he's been working out this offseason. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. He's out there, he's throwing to Garrett Wilson. He's like doing alignments with Sauce Gardner. They're at the game together. They're joking with Jessica Alba. It's the honeymoon phase, but it feels good. And it's better to have this kind of energy around the Jets than praying Zach Wilson makes a leap or opening the season with Josh McCown as your starting quarterback, which is where we've been spending most of the last like 6 to 7 years. And this team around him, we said this a lot last year, like it's not a perfect roster, but it's a pretty damn good roster. And you have a guy that could potentially be an all-pro receiver in Garrett Wilson. You have already one of the best cornerbacks in the league in Sauce Gardner. Are you concerned? I'm not concerned about this. I think if push comes to shove, Woody is just going to come over the top and be like, get this done, no distractions. Are you worried at all about the Quinnen Williams contract situation? Are we going to get a Darrelle Revis Hard Knocks 2.0 where he comes in at the last second and there's the negotiations? I feel like there's some posturing now, 5-6 more weeks of that, and then he's all good well in advance of training camp. I just feel like this would be the worst possible time for the Jets to get a little stingy with one of the very few homegrown players that clicked and really finally made a leap with the right coaching staff. Any concerns around Quinnen's overall situation?
I would say the concern level is maybe a 4 out of 10, because I do think they obviously value him. They know how important he is. They have market comps out there with recent signings that you should be able to get this thing done in that Dexter Lawrence territory. Just maybe beef up the guarantees a little bit and call it a day. And we saw the Carl Lawson restructure, which I loved. That freed up some space. They're going to redo Rodgers' deal. So I'm not going to start panicking until all this other housekeeping is done. And then that money's sitting there and the Jets choose not to use it on Quinnen Williams. Now, the reason it's 4 as opposed to 1 or 2 is because there is the recent history of the team. Obviously everything that happened with Jamal Adams, even though that turned out great. Leonard Williams got traded after a great start to his career. We know Revis, how his first time with the Jets ended. There has been some of that historically, but I'm not too concerned. I think the deal gets done. I would say if we want to like pivot, Joe, at all to things that I am a little worried about, because you had mentioned the skill groups, like do they have is there enough on offense? Like my colleague Greg Rosenthal he does this kind of roster reset thing where he goes through each roster. And I saw a tweet he put out there. Is Corey Davis our second best receiver? Like, I know I didn't have a big issue with Odell not coming here. I don't think that was a good fit. But are we a little short? Are we asking too much for the second year wide receiver to become a superstar now?
You can make a fair case. There's one move left to be had on offense for a playmaker. I think they thought internally they were going to get Odell, whether we would have liked the move or not. I think they were shocked at what Baltimore paid for him and that they lost him. And their plan B has basically been, we're going to restructure Corey Davis. We'll get him back on less money. Rodgers has expressed he's a fan of Davis in the past. And I think Lazard is probably their second best receiver when you throw in the chemistry with Rodgers. It's not that big of a gap, though, between him and Davis. Davis just has been banged up and not playing to the best of his ability the past 2 years. Some of that could be on the quarterback, although he's struggled with drops. I would love, and look, the cap in my mind is mostly fake. Can you monitor over the next few months? Is Mike Evans, is Chris Godwin, is Michael Pittman, is Keenan Allen? I'm throwing out random veteran, exciting receiver names. Is it one of those guys available for a surprise trade over the summer? You get that one extra move where I don't think it's going to be Devontae Adams for a million reasons. I know everyone got all excited earlier this week when he was criticizing the Raiders. Mm-hmm. They do feel like one receiver short, unless Davis is going to be healthy and get over the drops and Lazard could stay roughly the guy is, and maybe they unlock something else with Hardman. Clearly the relationship with Elijah Moore was done on both sides, which is a bummer. We were both excited about that guy. All Jet fans were, because there was a lot there his rookie year, and it just didn't work for a multitude of reasons. The reason that I'd like to see a little more at receiver is that they're okay at tight end. Like, they're fine. There's no one who's a game breaker. They're also not like totally empty of talent like it was during like the Jason Morrow and Jeff Cumberland years, but they're just okay. Running back, I'm pretty excited about getting Izzy in the 4th round. I think he'll add like some home run pop, but he's a rookie. And Brees, I don't think is going to be right till October. I don't know how much this staff is going to be in or out on Michael Carter, who had a really disappointing year last year.
Yeah,
did they add another veteran back, like a Fournette or a Kareem Hunt, to help sort of bridge the gap? So I don't know. Is any of that stuff realistic? Like, do you think that in that May, June, July, August window, they get a little itchy looking at the roster and make more of like a real all-in move? And is that guy out there, assuming Devontae Adams is completely unrealistic?
Yeah, I think they have to be wary of price, and of course they don't have a 1st round pick next year, most likely. How does that work, by the way? When there's
65%, he better play more than 65% of this.
But snaps. I mean, like, if you, I'll have to look this up, unless you know, like, if they can't trade away a 1st round pick next year, or they still have it, or like how does that work in terms of their hands being tied potentially for a big trade of draft pick when they have a conditional pick tied into it? I don't know. But yeah, Breece Hall is the other part of it. You mentioned him, and they did the offensive line was beat up and not playing at a high level at the end of the season either, but nobody stepped up and kind of took over there. So you're hoping maybe the rookie can step up and do some things, and then Hall comes back healthy. And then the only other part when I look at the offensive depth chart, Joe, is, should Teddy Bridgewater be back in this building? Like, are we really? Are we going to make the move, almost unprecedented move of quitting on a second overall pick after just 2 years, getting one of the most famous quarterbacks of all time, making it very clear that Zach Wilson is not in the picture right now, and then have him one snap away from being the quarterback of this team? There's obviously something missing there. And Teddy, who's been banged up, obviously, he's out there right now. There are a few other guys, but we can't go into the season with Zach Wilson as the number 2, right?
It feels very weird to do so. I just think there's too much weirdness and baggage there. I mean, I have Tim Boyle, who's more of like Rodgers' buddy and like learn the offense. He's not a real backup quarterback. Matt Ryan retired now. Nick Foles is probably going to retire. Bridgewater, he's been here. He has some meaningful experience. I swear to God, if they bring Joe Flacco back, I'm going to lose my mind. So I hope that doesn't happen.
No.
The Jets always do weird things with backup quarterbacks. So they've had years where they carried 4 at once with Petty and Hackenberg and Geno and Fitz. I would not be surprised. And it's kind of a terrifying thing. I respectfully to Zach, like, I can't spend any time like thinking about him and like this whole narrative that, he's going to get 2 years of seasoning behind Rodgers and then he's going to be the guy. That sounds totally insane to me. I can't think of any like precedent for that ever happening. Like, maybe he has a great preseason and they could flip him for like a second or third round pick and they have a different plan in place. But imagine if the Jets are like 5-1 and Rodgers gets knocked out for 2 or 3 weeks and now Zach Wilson's coming in. It just feels wild to me. I can't fathom that would be the plan. And we haven't even talked about offensive line yet. The Jets are putting a lot of chips still on Mekhi Becton at this point, who looks great, lost a lot of weight, hasn't played football in 2 years. Dwayne Brown, who I think they committed to being the left tackle, or he wouldn't be coming back. You got a guy in Billy Turner who's played with Rodgers. He's really more of a backup. Max Mitchell, probably more of a backup. AVT's back on the interior. I'm still a little worried about offensive line. So we're doing our Jet fan concern here, but that also bothers me. Then I try to remind myself that, no rosters are perfect, right? Everything is not going to be awesome. They're awesome on defensive line and edge, a lot of depth there. They're awesome at cornerback. They're awesome at quarterback now. But yeah, some of those holes are very real on offense. And I kind of feel like maybe outside of Quan Alexander coming back, they're probably just about done. There's no offensive linemen at this point who are going to make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't care what the spin zone that they put out after the draft. The Will McDonald thing was a pivot to me, and they got kind of screwed there by the Pittsburgh pick. It makes all the sense in the world to add a high level tackle at the top of that draft. We don't need to go down that road again. But I think, it did catch them off guard, and they did pivot and bring in some more veterans, and you just kind of got to cross your fingers. It was bad luck, a lot of bad luck in addition to Zach Wilson's failure last year along that offensive line. And the one thing that to spin it more optimistically with the line is a really good quarterback, a veteran quarterback makes a line better as well. And I think Rodgers can take a good line and make it look great, and an average line look good. I don't think I don't think it's going to be a tire fire on that line, but it might not be a strength of the team. But like you said, like this isn't the 1927 Yankees, to use a baseball analogy. Like, it's not the perfect team, but there are no perfect teams. So you need some things to go right. The line, I would definitely, in general, the offense, and that's why kind of it's a good spot a little bit, Joe. Like, the Jets are getting a lot of hype and a lot of primetime games. But there is also a lot of outside pushback that they're going to flop this season. And for everything an optimistic Jet fan can say about this offense specifically, and then assuming the defense is going to, again, be a top 5 type unit, you could point to all these different areas and right down to Aaron Rodgers and say, well, this could also happen. So it's not a slam dunk that this team soars to the top of the AFC East. There's still a projection here, and you need some things to go right. So that's a little like just trying to protect myself and protect ourselves, that, this isn't preordained now that the Jets are going to be a great team. We need some things to fall into place.
Yes. They need some things to break right, like all other teams. In my head right now, I'm shooting for an 11-6 season. I think if they could get to 11 and they win the right composition of games, including AFC East games, that could be enough to win the division. I don't know if I could really wrap my head around the Jets winning 12 games. It's only happened once in my life back in 98. 11, I feel like I could see, because I think you can make a fair case that there's a path to them being the best team in the division. They showed signs of being able to win division games last year, New England aside. I'll close with this. We've seen their schedule now. It's a very fun, unique schedule. What game jumped out to you as the one that, like, I really want to see the Jets win that game? We'll put New England aside because we all want to be. They need to sweep New England. They have not swept New England in like 20 plus years. Like, that's how long it's been. Like, we're going back like years and years and years. Put the Pats aside because they have to win that game, and I hope it's Zach Wilson starting week 18 because everything's clinched and wrapped up. What is the one that jumped out? You're like, man, that would be the one to win. That would be awesome this year.
Yeah. You took it out of my mouth. It was going to be the Patriots week 3 because I think that would slay a lot of dragons and put to bet a lot of things. But it is, for me, that those first 6 weeks, and then you go into a very well placed week 7 bye, is where if they get out of there with a winning record, I think the idea of a 12-win season is in play, and I think 11 is definitely within reach if they stay healthy. Because I don't like to overly project schedules and say it looks easy or but it seems a little soft in the back 9 for the Jets. So if you can get out of those top 6 games when you're facing 4 of the top offenses in football in good shape at 4-2 or even 3-3, I'm feeling good. So I'll circle week 6 against the Eagles. I think a lot of people see the Eagles as the best team in the league. That is a Fox 425 start. So what's that going to be? That's going to be Greg Olsen and
the A team in the booth.
Yes, God, the A team. I don't know, have the Jets ever been on Fox in the last 15 years with the A team in the booth? So they'll have they'll have a huge spotlight game against a powerhouse Eagles team. If they're playing good football to that point, and then they beat the Eagles and go into their bye soaring, man, like, we're going to be at a level. I'll tell you exactly where we're going to feel as a fan base. We're going to feel 8-3 Brett Favre season. Was it 8-3 after we beat the Titans, who were undefeated?
Yep. And going to celebrate Thanksgiving with your family and being like, yep, they're going to the Super Bowl this year. And then they didn't win a game the rest of the year.
Exactly. And we'll be in that place as a fan base where it's like all of a sudden it's no longer a projection. Like, this thing is happening and we are lined up to do it. So that Eagles game is my pick. What's yours?
Man, in the scenario that you played out, if they beat the Eagles and they're 4-2 going into the bye, you'll be on this podcast during the bye week and we're going to be talking about them going 13-4. I would say
we'll be booking our Super Bowl seats.
Yeah, we'll be getting ready for Vegas. I would say it's a cliche answer, but if they win week 1 on Monday Night Football against Buffalo, who will be the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East, there'll be a lot of everyone's crowning the Jets and they haven't done anything yet. This is still our division. That place is going to be insane. The building will be going nuts. Rodgers' first game. The entire country is going to be watching. The only game on that day. If they could go out and like beat Buffalo week 1, and especially in a convincing way, I think that will calm a lot of Jet fans' nerves to be like, oh, wow, we're for real this year. And then you're going into a scenario in week 2 where Rodgers has owned Dallas. So you feel comfortable in that game. And I think you can make a fair case the Jets are better than Dallas. And then if the Jets are coming back home 2-0 to play the Pats and finally break that streak, man, that's now we're getting to specialties. So I want to see the week 1 win just because the letdown of coming out with all this hype. Imagine you come out with all this hype and they go out and they lose 23-12 to Buffalo week 1 and they can't score on offense still. And it's like, oh my, there'd be too much early season anxiety. My heart can't take it at this stage.
Yeah. So, and I'll flip it to the other side just so we're not like, as my mother would say, spitting in the sky here. There is a reality where, that Bills game goes sideways. You go to Dallas. That's a tough spot. You're 0-2. Then you're going home and you got the freaking Patriots, and you're trying to avoid
with the Chiefs the week after too.
Yeah, so it becomes it gets nervous. It gets real quick, and I'm kind of with you. Like setting your season up with a win in prime time would really set them on a course where you could kind of ease into this thing and build some good vibes and momentum.
Dan, it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be one of the most unique seasons in Jet history, especially after the last 11 years of kind of blondness, of blurring together, of no success. The Kings broke their playoff streak. It's just the Jets and the Sabres at 12 years now. So the Jets need to break this streak. I cannot fathom in my life that it's been this long. I think it's tied their franchise record. I think from like the entire 70s and the early 80s, they didn't make the playoffs. It was like 12 or 13 years. So we can't break a new franchise record. Thank you for joining us. We'll have you on hopefully when the Jets are 4-2 at the bye to talk about our Super Bowl plans. I will share all of Dan's stuff in the bio, but everyone here is already following and listening to him, but keep it up. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you. And I don't know if this gentleman has been on your show, but to everything you just said, from your lips to God's ears.
Amen.